Welcome to SST8's series on evidence-based instructional strategies. This webinar is one in our series of webinars on evidence-based instructional strategies. The intent of these webinars is for teacher-based teams, individual teachers, or building level teams to view and discuss this content and provide flexibility in meeting your professional development needs. For example, you may choose to chunk the content and break it up over multiple days, or you may wish to use it as part of a professional development day. During this webinar, we will provide a brief introduction to the topic of mathematical discourse and consider one strategy to start students talking and engaging with conceptual understanding while problem solving. To support your learning during this session, you will want to access our evidence-based strategies mathematical discourse resource document to use throughout the training. So gather your team members and let's get to it. For this webinar, there are three learning intentions. Participants will develop a foundational understanding of literacy and language, consider one approach to increasing discourse for students during problem solving, and develop a plan to utilize an instructional routine in an upcoming lesson. According to a call for manuscripts from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in 2010, discourse is the mathematical communication that occurs in a classroom. Effective discourse happens when students articulate their own ideas and seriously consider their peers' mathematical perspectives as a way to construct mathematical understandings. Encouraging students to construct their own mathematical understanding through discourse is an effective way to teach mathematics, especially since the role of the teacher has transformed from being a transmitter of knowledge to one who presents worthwhile and engaging mathematical tasks. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics has encouraged teachers to use classroom discourse in math classes to support both students' ability to reason mathematically and their ability to communicate that reasoning. When teachers commit themselves to teaching for understanding, classroom discourse and discussion are key elements in the overall picture. At this time, locate the Quick Write section on your mathematical discourse resource document, pause the webinar, and respond to the prompt. What opportunities do you provide students in your classroom to articulate their own ideas and consider their peers' perspective while constructing their own mathematical understandings? Then, share out your thoughts with your team. Resume the webinar when you are ready to move on. Now that you have primed your brain for learning, let's take a few moments to build some background knowledge and take a quick look at the components of language and the role that they play in a math lesson. When we consider how we can address literacy within a math lesson, we start with the four areas specific to the concept of literacy stated in Ohio's standards: reading and listening, which fall under receptive language, and speaking and writing, which fall under expressive language. When designing learning opportunities for students, we should think about the roles that both oral and written language play in students developing conceptual understanding. As we begin to discuss how to increase mathematical discourse within a lesson, it's crucial to keep in mind both the receptive language component, or the input, and the expressive language component, or the output. How do students take information in through reading and listening, and then share their understanding through speaking and writing? Notice the four icons below the words reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Throughout this webinar, the book icon will suggest that reading is involved. The pencil will notate when students are writing. The conversation icon will be used when students are incorporating listening strategies, and the speech bubble will reference students speaking. Our essential question for learning today is, what roles do reading, writing, listening, and speaking play in a math lesson? And what do I need to consider when designing instruction? Before we begin to answer that question, let's take a moment to consider the simple view of reading. This will provide some additional background knowledge for those who are less familiar with the science of reading. The simple view of reading is an equation based on multiplication. For a student to be able to comprehend what they are reading, we need to think of two specific factors. The first being decoding, or the student's ability to apply sound-symbol relationships in order to read words. And the second factor is language comprehension, or a student's ability to understand spoken language, which includes vocabulary and background knowledge. If a student is unable to sound out words and doesn't understand what is being said, he or she will not be able to comprehend what is written. And just like multiplication, if either component is absent, which would be a factor of 0, then reading comprehension cannot occur. Also, if a student has partial ability in both decoding and language comprehension, then reading comprehension or the product will be less than either of the factors alone. If students struggle with either factor in the simple view of reading, then all of their brain resources are spent in trying to comprehend, and therefore there are fewer brain sources available for problem solving. Similar to the simple view of reading, when designing math lessons, we should also consider the simple view of writing. Notice that the two factors of writing include foundational skills, which consist of letter formation, handwriting, or typing fluency, spelling, punctuation, and word and sentence spatial organization. And the second factor is composition, which includes topic knowledge, vocabulary or word choice, sentence formulation, grammar and usage, literary forms, organization of ideas, and audience awareness. Notice that skilled written expression is the product of both the foundational skills and composition, just as reading comprehension is the product of decoding and language comprehension. At this time, pause the webinar to discuss the simple view of reading and the simple view of writing, both of which can be found on your resource document, and what you are thinking now in terms of what you have noticed in your classroom regarding students' abilities to read and write. What have you done in the past to support students in these areas? After your team has discussed these two models, resume the webinar. As we dive into mathematical discourse, we are going to consider the roles that reading, writing, speaking, and listening can play during a lesson while supporting students in clarifying understandings, constructing convincing arguments, developing the language to express mathematical ideas, and learning to see things from other perspectives. Information in this session comes from Visible Learning for Literacy and Mathematics, Disciplinary Literacy in Action, Student Achievement Partners, and Fostering Math Practices. This is just a sampling of the information and research that can be found for mathematical discourse. As we begin to talk about mathematical discourse, let's take a moment to quickly review John Hattie's research and the idea of effect sizes. Effect size is a statistical concept that measures the strength of the relationship between two variables. In his research, John has found that the average effect size over all of the educational effects that he has studied is 0.4. Hattie considers the 0.4 effect size to be a marker that represented a year's growth per year of schooling for a student. Therefore, anything above 0.4 would have a greater positive effect on student learning. When we talk about learning, there are three types of learning: surface, deep, and transfer. According to Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, surface learning refers to building foundational knowledge, such as concepts, skills, strategies. Deep learning is consolidating foundational knowledge to be able to apply and extend students' own learning to develop a deeper understanding. And transfer learning is the point where students take all of their knowledge and their understanding and apply them in new and different contexts. Fisher, Fry, and Hattie have categorized numerous evidence-based strategies. Notice where questioning and talk fall in regard to surface, deep, and transfer learning. Mathematical talk, self-verbalization, verbalization, and self-questioning, and class discussion are both surface, deep, and transfer learning strategies. with self-verbalization and questioning coming in with a 0.64 effect size, and class discussion with a 0.82 effect size. These are both higher than John Hattie's hinge point of 0.4. You will find a more complete list of strategies and effect sizes from Visible Learning for Math on the last page of your resource document. However, at this time, we will continue to focus on mathematical discourse and communication. Learning is the process of developing sufficient surface knowledge to then move to deeper understanding such that one can appropriately transfer this learning to new tasks and situations. This is the power of classroom talk and mathematical discourse. A strategy to increase discourse that we are going to consider during this webinar is one that teachers can implement when students are practicing applying mathematical concepts and skills. It consists of 6 steps and utilizes conversations in pairs or triads, as well as whole group discussion. It is an adaptation of a strategy mentioned in Disciplinary Literacy in Action by Lett and Voigt. These 6 steps are listed in a table on your resource document. As we go through each step, you may wish to use the space in the table to write down information that you want to remember about each step. As you develop your lesson and want students to work on problem solving, step 1 in this strategy is for students to read the problem individually. Students read the problem silently and write down or type what they believe is the important information and what the problem is asking. This would be similar to a quick write. This step asks for students to engage in reading and writing. In step 2, students talk with a partner and compare their responses from step 1. In this step, students talk about the problem with a partner and compare their notebook quick writes. If the responses are different, students can read the problem again, discuss further, or ask for clarification from the teacher. This step encourages students to speak and listen to each other while expressing mathematical thinking and listening to different perspectives. Step 3 in the strategy asks pairs or triads to collaboratively determine the steps needed to solve the problem. During this step, partners determine together what steps are needed to solve the problem. Students can jot down the information that they and their partner have discussed and decide what information is needed to solve the problem, and they can identify how the problem can be solved. This collaborative step is one way to provide some additional supports and scaffolds for students that would benefit from hearing other students talk through how they would solve the problem. During step 4, students attempt to solve the problem individually. This is the step in the process where students will take the information that they have gathered thus far and work individually to solve the problem. During this step, students may need to reread the problem and their notes that they've written down as they persevere in solving the problem on their own. During this step, teachers may need to provide individual supports, scaffolds, and questioning to encourage students through this productive struggle. In step 5 of this strategy, students will compare their solutions with their partner. When comparing their solutions, students will ask each other, does each of our solutions make sense? Can we check our results? Students again are practicing their speaking and listening skills while writing down any notes and making changes to their responses. And in the final step of this strategy, teachers lead a whole class discussion. As the teacher leads a whole class discussion, students offer mathematical reasoning related to their solutions. It is during this time you can expand on student explanations and ask students to agree or disagree with those solution methods. This is also a time when you can have students explain their reasoning and expand on what they discussed with their partners. As you are planning for upcoming lessons and thinking about questions to ask your students to increase student thinking and discourse, you may wish to use the document 100 Questions That Promote Mathematical Discourse, a resource that was created by iReady. The link to this resource can be found on your resource document. And at this time, pause the webinar, click on the link, and look through the questions. Find 2 questions that you have not used before in your classroom and that you want to build into your next lesson. Write these 2 questions down on your resource document and then share out what questions you chose with your team. Resume the webinar after everyone has had a chance to share out. In addition to the 6-step problem-solving strategy we just reviewed, you may wish to consider implementing instructional routines in your classroom. Instructional routines are specific and repeatable classroom structures that enable all students to engage more fully in learning opportunities that develop their mathematical thinking and reasoning. In today's webinar, we are going to consider 2 routines that would also support students in developing their expressive and receptive language skills. The first routine is called 3 Reads. The 3 Reads instructional routine is designed to develop students' ability to make sense of problems by deconstructing the process of reading mathematical situations. Over time, students will internalize this process, thereby creating a heuristic for reading and making sense of mathematical story problems, which is mathematical practice 1. The infographic on the screen captures the flow of the routine. You will find resources for this routine listed on your resource document. You may find that these resources will help to support your implementation of the routine. The second instructional routine is Decide and Defend. This is an instructional routine in which students make sense of another's line of mathematical reasoning, decide if they agree with that reasoning, and then draft an argument defending their decision. The routine fosters mathematical practice 3, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Again, the infographic captures the flow of the routine. Resources for this routine can also be found on your resource document. These resources will support your implementation of this routine. At this time, you will have the opportunity to explore one of the 2 instructional math routines and design an upcoming lesson in which you can use the routine. Your team may choose to work together on one specific routine or jigsaw the activity and share out what each group learned. Regardless of your choice, this is your time to investigate, reflect, and develop a lesson plan for an upcoming lesson using your routine of choice. Think of this as an opportunity for you and your team to collaboratively design a lesson. Here are the steps that will guide you through this activity. Step 1, choose either the 3 Reads or Decide and Defend instructional routine. Step 2, locate the corresponding links on your resource document. Step 3, begin to investigate the routine and consider how it might work in your classroom. Choose an upcoming topic, skill, or standard for which the routine will work well. Step 4, download the teacher and student resources and begin to create your action or lesson plan. Step 5, reflect on how this routine could be adapted if you were teaching remotely. Step 6, share out your plan for implementation with your team members. And step 7, make note of any ideas you would like to remember. This activity could take 40 to 60 minutes, which includes time for each team or team member to share out their ideas. Set a timer, pause the webinar, and resume when your team is ready to move on. Welcome back. I'm sure that you and your team have developed some great ideas and plans for an upcoming lesson. As we close out this webinar, keep in mind the role that reading, writing, listening, and speaking play in supporting students' ability to gain deeper conceptual understanding. And when we think about additional benefits of discourse, there are 5 reasons talk is critical to teaching and learning. First, talk can reveal understanding and misunderstanding. Talk also supports robust learning by boosting memory. It supports deeper reasoning and supports that language development. And talk supports the development of social skills. Let's revisit our essential question. What roles do reading, writing, listening, and speaking play in a math lesson, and what do I need to consider when designing instruction? Moving forward, what will you do differently to increase mathematical discourse in your classroom? Thank you for your time and participation in this webinar. For additional information on instructional strategies, please visit our website, www.sst8.org/school-improvement, or check out our School Improvement playlist on our State Support Team 8 YouTube channel.